It is often called the single eye and is the master key of life, an escape from all sickness, trouble, and reversing the fall of man. So the point is very much we need to change our thoughts. We need to go into the inner, we have control, fine, we get all that. How do we do it? What are the ways to do that? And what I love so much about this book is it's a blueprint for how to do that. It goes deeper and deeper down into the specifics of how we do this. So on page 35, we have the line, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." He continues, "Let us be merciful in our mental judgments of our brother, for in truth we are all one, and the more deeply he seems to err, then the more urgent is the need for us to help him. We help him most by emitting the right thought, making it easier for him to get free. Because you understand the power of the spiritual idea, you have a responsibility to do this." So powerful. And the notion of forgiveness, which we all know is such a deeply rooted quality that we know represents the best of us. But it's not just forgiveness and saying the words. What he's saying here, he keeps going to the same thing, doesn't he? It's the mental forgiveness, the forgiveness in your heart. You may have had a situation with others that hurt you, and you may have forgiven it. But the question is, have we really forgiven it? One of my favorite lines in this book is when he says, we help him most by emitting the right thought. The thought is the frequency. It's the energetic. And we have control over that. We have control over our state of mind. So are we thinking about any situations with pain, with judgment? Are we still angry? And if so, how can we change our experience, our inner experience of that anger, that frustration into a right thought, a loving thought, a kind thought? He says that the more deeply he seems to err, the more urgent is the need for us to help him. And because you know this, you have a responsibility to do that. At this level of development, that is the path that you've said yes to. For those of you that have had any awakening experience, you know that once you have that awakening experience and you have some higher realization, you can't go back. You can't forget. It will always drive you. You can't forget. It's always going to push you forward. We may try to forget, but it doesn't work. So that's what he's saying here, is that we have a responsibility to forgive others. We have a responsibility to do the work to change our perceptions of anger, hurt, pain, resentment into loving kindness. Okay? It's very, very clear how he says this. And it's the mental forgiveness, which I think we need to really focus on here. He says on page 36, above all, it's true that in freeing others from the weight of condemnation, you make it possible to absolve yourself from self-condemnation. So the act of forgiving others amplifies the act of forgiving yourself. Everything on the external is an expression of the inner. So when you feel anger, resentment, negative qualities towards others, what in reality is happening is that you feel that way about yourself. So that realization has to spurn you to forgive, because you don't want to hate yourself. The path to living a great life is self-love, loving yourself. And if everything is an expression of you, then that is the path that we must take. So on page 37, he starts talking about space and time. I just love this. This book was translated in 1936, coming from Jesus, who wrote this thousands of years ago. And he starts talking here about the limitation of our cognitive minds. And he says, quote, God is divine mind. And in that mind, where there are no limitations or restrictions at all, yet right now we see everything distributed in what is called space, or it's all spaced out, which is an artificial restriction that continuously inhibits the constant regrouping of our experience that is required by our creative thought. And I must say, this line is so profound. Can we connect with the infinite oneness, the infinite truth, and see ourselves in relation to that? And it's humbling to realize that we are just part of this thing, this evolution that is so massive. And we take our lives and our circumstances so seriously. But when you read this, it just cuts right through like a knife to the truth. It was like, this is so insignificant and temporary from that standpoint. We're part of something so much larger, an unfolding that is so powerful, so creative at its source. And we can tap into that by letting go of the cognitive analytical truths. We're living in a world that is so dominated by scientific theory. Everything has to be proven by science. And I love it. I love science. But at the same time, I also laugh at times that science is proving things that someone like Jesus knew 2,000 years ago. Think about it that way. How did people so long ago know things that were so true? It's through these practices of contemplation. So starting to see the nature of reality, how we view time and space and events in our lives in context with the greater truth is what Jesus calls the master practice of contemplation, contemplating, putting ourselves in context with the greater story. On page 38, he starts talking about the pure of heart, the quality of purity. And Emmet Fox says, quote, purity in the Bible means a lot more than just physical purity. Purity means the never-ending recognition of God as the only real cause and the only real power in existence. It is often called the single eye and is the master key of life, an escape from all sickness, trouble, and reversing the fall of man. So the concept of purity, being pure, is being pure in thought, which is going to the source. And our practice of letting go and surrendering to that truth is something that we must come back to again and again. And on page 39, he says that total acceptance of this is required. Quote, because it is not sufficient for us to accept the truth with the conscious mind only. It is still mere opinion. It is not until it is accepted by the subconscious mind and only when assimilated into the whole mentality that it can make any difference in one's character of life. As a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. And so clearly, this is the practice. This is a never-ending, constant remembering that in every day, every moment of your life, you have an opportunity to connect with this truth that right here, right now, I know it, I can see it in your faces. You get it. It's clear. We're there. Then we're going to go off in our lives and forget. And the call here, how wise, for 2,000 years, like this has to be integrated in all the parts of our mentality is what Jesus taught. And now we're talking about the subconscious mind and there's so much science around all that. But it was known a long time ago. And there's so many practices that we can do. For me, in the middle of the night, if I wake up in that dream state, I'll bring myself back to this place, to this contemplation. Even practicing in all the different states, in the shower, while I'm working, even right now as I'm speaking, always remembering our connection with something so much larger and having that energy pulsate through us. And it isn't successful until we fully inhabit and embody these ways of being, these ways of thinking in all the parts of our mentality. Just so far ahead of its time when this was given to us as a gift. On page 40, he starts talking about prayer. And I have to be totally transparent. I never loved that word growing up. I was never somebody who prayed. It wasn't until I read this book that I understood the power of prayer. On page 40, he says that scientific prayer is the only thing that changes one's character. A change in character or a change in soul is a real change. And when that kind of change takes place, you become a different person. And therefore, for the very rest of your life, you act in a different way from the way in which you have previously acted. Had you not prayed, you don't become a different person. And so prayer is the action that we take. So everything that we're talking about here is a dialogue, changing our inner thoughts, which requires awareness, which requires you to be aware of your thinking, to become the observer or witness to yourself to the point where you can understand that there's a mechanism of thought that creates feelings and ideas. So we must be able to contemplate and get to that place. Prayer is the action we can take from that subtle place that interacts with the divine. So we have the ability to interact, to pray, to intend. And when we bring our thinking mind down into subtler and subtler states of quiet, of calm, we increase the power of our prayer.